The words came out of the dark like something sharp pressed softly against his throat. Your hands, that was wrong. The rancher froze with his palms hovering inches above the rough wooden lid. He hadn't realized he'd leaned so close, hadn't noticed how his breath had fogged the air just above the crate. The cellar smelled of wet soil and rusted metal, a deep, old smell that felt older than the house itself. Rain hammered the ground overhead, each drop a dull thud that echoed down through the beams like a slow, accusing heartbeat. He stood perfectly still, afraid even the slightest movement might tear something open that could not be closed again. I didn't know, he said finally. His voice sounded too small in the low, crowded dark. I was just looking. The lantern hanging from its hook swayed, though he hadn't touched it. The light stretched and bent, turning the cellar walls into long, crooked shapes that seemed to lean inward. For weeks he'd felt drawn to this place, to the door at the far end of the kitchen that no one ever used anymore. His father had kept it locked. His grandfather before him had nailed a warning above it and then refused to explain what it meant. Don't go down there after dark. Don't touch what's not meant for you. Don't ask. Tonight, the storm had torn the latch loose. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe he'd only wanted to believe that. I'll go, he said quickly, words tumbling over each other. I'll shut the door. I won't come back. Silence answered him, heavy and deliberate. It pressed against his ears until he was sure he could hear his own blood moving. Forgetting, the voice said at last, closer now, as if it had stepped out of the shadows, is not a door you can simply close. The rancher's hands began to ache. It wasn't pain, not exactly, more like pressure, as if something beneath his skin was pushing outward. He lowered them slowly, heart racing, and watched as faint red lines appeared across his palms. They traced patterns he recognized instantly, though he could not have said how he knew them. The same symbols carved into the crate, the same lines he had followed with his fingertips only moments before, curious, careless, convinced they were nothing more than old decoration. No, he whispered, that's not real. The lantern flame shrank, then flared bright, throwing harsh light across the cellar. For a breathless moment, the carvings on the crate seemed to move, the grooves darkening, writhing like living things. He staggered back, his boots slipping on damp stone, and hit the wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. The cellar was no longer empty. Faces pressed out from the stone as if the walls themselves had softened. Eyes closed tight, mouths open in soundless cries. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the image clung to him, burned behind his lids. You were warned, the voice said. There was no anger in it, no triumph. Only certainty. Hands remember what the mind denies. A deep sound rose from the floor, low and heavy, vibrating up through his boots and into his bones. The crate shuddered. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Somewhere above, the house creaked, wood groaning as though something massive had shifted its weight. The rancher pushed off the wall and stumbled toward the stairs. Each step felt farther away than it should have been, the distance stretching, the air growing colder with every breath. He grabbed the railing, leaving behind dark smears where his hands touched the wood, as if the grain itself bruised beneath his skin. Halfway up, the lantern went out. Darkness swallowed him whole, not the soft dark of a closed room, but something vast and layered, pressing in from every direction. His breath came fast and ragged. He reached blindly for the steps, panic clawing at his chest, when something closed around his wrists. It wasn't a grip. There were no fingers, no warmth. Just pressure, absolute, undeniable, holding him in place. Listen, the voice said, now everywhere at once. Above him, beneath him, inside his own skull. You woke what was resting. Images surged into his mind without warning. The land as it had been long before fences cut it into squares. Before cattle trampled the grass flat. Firelight flickering in the open field. People standing in a circle, hands raised not in threat, but in promise. The earth open at their feet, waiting. Then fear, a sudden, sharp fracture. Shouts, the circle breaking apart, the crate being sealed, buried, hidden. Those sworn to watch it bound just as tightly as what lay inside, condemned to remain when everything else moved on. The pressure around his wrists tightened. His hands burned now, the symbols glowing faintly in the dark. I didn't mean to, he said, tears blurring his vision. I didn't know what it was. That, the voice replied, calm and terrible, is why it is worse. Something shifted behind him, slowly, deliberately. The air grew colder, thicker, as though something vast had leaned closer. Every instinct screamed at him not to turn, not to acknowledge it fully. He knew, with a certainty deeper than thought, that if he looked, whatever stood there would step closer. And closer still, until there was no space left for him at all. "Please," he whispered, "tell me how to fix it." The pressure released so suddenly his knees buckled. He sagged forward, catching himself on the step, sobbing once despite himself. "You will carry it," the voice said, "until it decides otherwise." The lantern flared back to life on the cellar floor. The light was weaker now, as if it were tired. The walls were stone again. Solid, silent. The faces were gone. The crate sat still and harmless looking, its carvings dull and lifeless. The rancher didn't wait to see if it would move again. He ran up the remaining steps, slammed the door shut, and threw the bolt with shaking hands. The storm outside had softened to a steady rain, the sound almost gentle. He leaned against the kitchen counter, gasping, surrounded by the familiar smells of wood smoke and coffee grounds and old oilcloth. For a few fragile seconds, he almost believed he could pretend none of it had happened. Then his hands began to explain themselves. The ache returned, deeper now, pulsing in time with his heart. He raised them slowly into the light. The symbols were still there, etched into his skin as if they had always belonged. They glowed faintly, then dimmed, then glowed again. A floorboard creaked beneath his feet. He spun around, breath caught in his throat. The kitchen was empty. The windows rattled softly in the wind. Yet the feeling remained, that sense of being watched, measured, weighed. He scrubbed his hands together, hard enough to redden the skin, but the marks did not fade. They only warmed, responding to his touch like something alive. Outside, across the fields, the cattle shifted uneasily. One lowed, long and mournful. Another answered, then another, the sound spreading like a ripple through the dark. The rancher backed away from the door that led to the cellar. He told himself he wouldn't go back down there. He told himself he would board it shut, seal it, forget. The symbols pulsed again, patient as a waiting breath. Somewhere beneath the house, deep in the earth that had been asked once to remember and never to forgive, something stirred, not awake, not asleep, but aware now. And it knew exactly whose hands had touched it first.